my presentation in English. So my name is TRECH, and I've been working on British Asian cinema, British cinema and Indian cinema also, and about diaspora in Britain, the South Asian diaspora in Britain. So I finished a PhD 2 years ago, and I'm teaching English at the University of Rouen. So I'm glad you talked about DevDas before, because when you first came up with this theme, I thought about DevDas, of course. But I've already written articles about it, so I'm glad it was done this morning. And I'm also glad you talked about the identity theory and all that, so I will avoid repetitions. So I would like to focus on two British Asian films. Very briefly, British Asian films are British films which deal with the South Asian diaspora in Britain. So South Asian means in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and so on. So I chose two examples which are very famous. For the first one, East is East is very popular, right? And its sequel, West is West. So British Asian movies, on the one hand, create a link with the South Asian heritage, and on the other hand, are separate from it. The protagonists have to face the dilemma of dual identity, a real dichotomy, South Asian and British. In most British Asian movies, young characters would make a choice between heritage and rupture, or at least find a balance, a difficult balance. East is East and its sequel West is West both had the distinction of staging an interesting turnaround situation. In the first film, heritage is initially rejected, leading to a family breakdown. The characters break away from the traditions and culture of their parents to create new ones, or at least find a difficult balance. And we can make a link with what was said yesterday or the day before, that rupture is also part of the inheritance also. In the sequel, West is West, everything changed after a trip to Pakistan, where the rupture leaves a little more space for parental cultural heritage and identity. So we'll focus on two characters of the two films, George Khan, played by Om Puri, and his youngest son, Sajid. They have the particularity of having opposite stories, but to claim the same hybrid identity in the same family. So in the first film, East is East, and actually in both films, more than any other, the characters actually oscillate between two identities and two cultures. It allows the British Asian duality to come out, because the children of George and Ella, you can see here, are biologically half British and half Pakistani. In the film, it's a comedy, right? So in the film, they call them half-bred all the time. The first film is set in 1971 in Sorbonne, Manchester. George, of Pakistani Muslim origin, played by Om Puri, has a fish and chip shop. He's a real tyrant with his English wife, Ella, and their 7 children. If his wife and children do not obey his orders, he threatens to bring his first Pakistani wife in England. He's determined to raise his children according to Pakistani traditions and Islam, but his children do not agree with that. So George was born in Pakistan, but has lived in England for 30 years, where he built his life with his English wife. Thus, one might think that George is integrated into British culture, but in fact he's not. He regrets not having been able to convince his wife to go and live in Bradford, where the Pakistani community is more important than Manchester. And there's also a recurring symbol of the identity crisis of George in both films. it is his desire to ask for half a cup of tea. If you've seen the film, he's repeating that all the time. I only want half a cup, not a full one, half a cup. So he drinks tea, which is nowadays the English drink par excellence, but only half a cup. And I would like to quote the director of the British Museum, who said a few years ago, "What could be more British and less British than tea?" Tea embodies the British Asian paradox, since it often comes from India, but Britain has taken it and made it its national drink. So the choice of George to drink only half a cup makes it clear that his identity is party. Sir George is a paradoxical character, since he chose to come to England to marry an English woman to open a fish and chip shop, which is named the English Chippy, but refuses to be considered English by not adopting the habits and customs of his host country. I'll give you more examples later on if you want. Moreover, we can note that George has the same name of the patron saint of England and many British monarchs, but in fact his real name is Jahangir, but he preferred to anglicize it. However, despite few integration efforts, it's clear that in East is East, at least, George is a Pakistani man living in England, and he does not consider himself English or either British Asian. It's also interesting to look at another character, so the youngest son of George, Sajid. He is the alter ego of the author and screenwriter of both films, Ayub Khan Din. So Sajid is the youngest son of George, yet he does not consider himself Pakistani at all. He's not very talkative and hides his head under a huge hood that he never leaves. Not even for family pictures, as you can see. Nevertheless, some words betray his childish mind. For example, when he discovers Bradford, he sees all the concentration of Pakistani people and says, and I quote Sajid, "There are hundreds of them then." And similarly, when the Shah family comes to introduce the prospect of two daughters marrying his brothers, he shouted to his mother when he saw them, and I quote Sajid, "Mom, the Pakis are here." However, Sajid is not considered British by his classmates. Indeed, in West is West, film opens with a scene in which Sajid is chased by classmates. He's a victim of what we call Paki bashing. And conversely, the school headmaster seems to enjoy the former British colony and quotes Kipling, showing the cover of Kim to Sajid. Paradoxically, this Englishman tries to point out to the young boy that he misses out on a culture and literary heritage by ignoring his Pakistani identity. He asks Sajid, "You do not speak Urdu, like your father?" And Sajid replies, "No, I'm English, sir." When you ask him to point out Pakistan on a map, Sajid is totally lost and points to European countries. Worried about this lack of consideration for the Pakistani culture, his father decides to take Sajid on a trip to Pakistan because he says he does not know who he is. Sajid's character was inspired by the experience of Ayub Khan Din, who was also sent to Pakistan when he was 12. The cultural gap leads to comical scenes where the young Sajid seems to be completely out of touch with Pakistan and uncomfortable. The cultural shock is well expressed in West is West, since there is no real transition from Sajid's departure from England and his arrival in Pakistan. For example, as soon as Sajid arrives in Pakistan, he meets his whole family right away, his whole Pakistani family right away. And of course, he does not seem to feel very comfortable with them. And as a consequence, he's very rude to everyone. For example, he calls a young Pakistani boy Mowgli and has no respect for the rest of the village. Moreover, he refuses to take his school uniform off to wear the local clothes and cannot adapt to the precarious living conditions that are proposed. Nevertheless, gradually but reluctantly, Sajid comes to understand the Pakistani culture he previously rejected. This is certainly due to his spiritual guide, a wise old man who plans his discovery of Pakistan. Well, as you say before, an Indian or Pakistani person who returns to his homeland after a long stay in the West might make us think of Devdas. So in fact, in both films, George is indeed a Devdas, while Sajid seems to be the opposite of Devdas, because he made the opposite travel Devdas made. I wrote an article about it. I've published an article about this topic. Nevertheless, the comparison with another iconic literature character seems to be more appropriate here. Indeed, Sajid is associated with the character of Rudyard Kipling, Kim. Hence, the novel is mentioned several times in the film. Very briefly, so Kim, as well as Sajid, gets to know a spiritual guide or a teacher or a Sufi. I don't really know how to call him. If you've got ideas that could help me. So this is Pir Nasim here for Sajid and Tibetan Lama for Kim. The novel describes a multicultural India in which the Anglo-Indian Kipling had grown up. Kim and Sajid are, we could say, the synthesis of East and West in all their cultural diversity. So the boys will both conduct also their initiation quest in Pakistan. The incipit of Kim is the recurrent quotation in the film, as you can see here. I'm not going to read it. And in fact, Kipling's novel is a true cultural and literature heritage for Sajid. At first, Sajid does not want to read the novel given by his teacher in England, but gradually the boy notices it has things in common with the main characters. He identifies with Kim and ends up exclaiming loudly in the film, "Who holds Anzama, that fire-breathing dragon, hold the Punjab?" This may mean that he identifies with the English settlers, but also embraces this land and culture as much as his birthland. There are many readings. Little by little, Sajid discovers his Pakistani heritage and history with his young friend Hakshi, calls him Mowgli, and his guide, Pir Nasim. In the film West is where the scene is particularly explicit in regard to the discovery of the Pakistani heritage. We are witnessing the transformation of Sajid from ignorance to acceptance in a way. Sajid puts on, at last, the local Pakistani outfit and even seems to feel at ease with it. I'm going to show you a very short scene, two-minute long scene, so you can see by yourself what I'm talking about, and I'm coming back to it later on. Can we turn off the lights? Excuse me.
How does it feel?
Looks alright.
But how does it feel?
Comfortable. I feel comfortable.
Good. He sat in defiance of municipal orders, astride the Grand Zamzama,
on her brick platform opposite the old Ajaib Gym.
the Wonder House, as the natives call the Lahore Museum. Natives? What imperialist rubbish?
PG.
Very well. Who holds Zamzama? That fire-breathing cannon holds the
Hold the
Punjab.
Punjab.
Come, I'll walk with you.
You've been asking me what you've been teaching me all this time.
And what do you tell?
But you won't tell me anything?
Very good, very good. I wish you to remain ignorant.
He's still going on about me being more Pakistani and traditional.
Your father and many like him have made better lives for themselves abroad. But do you think you can move to another country and expect to find everything the same? That your new world will not affect your life? As for tradition, well, I walk to my hut every night by the same path. Now, if a cobra decides to sit in the middle of that path, do I walk on and get bitten? Or do I take the other path and live? We have to adapt to the situations and worlds we find ourselves in. The alternative?
You shall get your ass bitten by a snake.
Yes, amongst other things.
Okay, sorry, it was too dark. But they were sitting by the fire, and I'm sure you recognize him and all that. And I'm not going to repeat what I was saying here. So, after all, this trip to Pakistan seems to have been beneficial for Sajid. But what effect did it have on George, who is seen as a Pakistani immigrant in the eye of his son? In his native country, George Jahangir then hopes to show his sons and daughter that he is highly respected by his family members he left behind. In fact, George is also in a ruptured relationship with his first wife and family. He abandoned her for 30 years with their 2 daughters. And when he returns, he is treated like a stranger on his land. Nobody wants him back in Pakistan. His wife tells him that the Pakistani Jahangir does not exist anymore for her. So George is also unable in the film to accomplish his father and landowner's tasks. As screenwriter Ayub Kandin said in an interview, what George discovers is the life he's trying to teach Sajid doesn't exist anymore. It's him who has to start learning about the life he left in Pakistan. So he's therefore considered as a Pakistani man in England, and as we could say an Englishman in Pakistan, condemned to be an outsider in both countries. And the last West is West movie scene illustrates the fragile balance between heritage and rupture. Sajid is seen sitting on the roof of his house in a native district near Manchester. He's playing the flute, Pierre Nassim gave him. He wears a duffel coat, tartan pants, and as you can see in both photographs, in both pictures. So this image is a fine representation of the identity of Sajid, that is to say, truly English, but is no longer ignorant of his origins, of his heritage. To conclude, we can say that the films East is East and West is West present characters that break with their cultural heritage or their new country in the same family. So after a trip to Pakistan, a sort of homecoming for one and an initiating journey for the other, the father and son find a balance between heritage and rupture. Very quickly, I will just quote the actor who plays Sajid, who said in an interview, and I quote, "In the film, Sajid resents his father. He thinks he is English. He does not know anything about the Pakistani culture, whereas his father wants him to be the same. If you go to a different country, don't expect it to be the same. That is what George learns, and that is what Sajid learns. He realizes being half Pakistani and half English is what defines him as a person."